Welcome to this episode of the Sridhar Podcast. The series is specifically for engineering students and recent graduates. We'll hear entrepreneurs, founders, and executives in tech answer questions about the decisions they made when they were studying in university, as well as early in their careers. I am super excited to introduce today's guest, Ram Soundararajan. Ram is the CEO and founder of Qubertech, a tech startup in the UK, building products for the manufacturing industry. Prior to starting Qubertech, Ram has worked at a number of global companies, including Booz & Company, McKinsey & Company, and ITC Limited. He was also the general manager at Grafe, a US headquartered manufacturing company. Ram is an alumnus of the London Business School, the University of Texas at Austin, and the National Institute of Technology in Trichy, India. Welcome, Ram.
Sridhar, thanks for having me. Really excited about this.
So great to have you here. So Ram, can you walk us through your thought process when you decided to work right after undergrad instead of continuing to study further?
So obviously, I graduated long time ago, almost 20 years ago or so. I actually right after I graduated, I ended up working for ITC Limited, which is one of the largest FMCG CPG firms out of India, and I obviously graduated from an Indian engineering school, so that was an obvious choice in many ways. The thought process actually was quite simple. You basically had two criteria based on which you had to make certain choices, right? One was what your personal circumstances are at that point in time, and therefore potentially working for a large organization, earning a bit of a salary, and taking care of your financial requirements obviously was a top consideration. But keeping those practicalities aside, it made a lot of sense to go work for an organization that was without a doubt seen as a company with phenomenal business practices, phenomenal capabilities, was investing billions of dollars at that point in growing a number of their business sectors they were actually exposed to. So it was a very, very exciting time to go work for them, and I was really thrilled to work for them, even though it was only for about a couple of years or so. It was a great opportunity to learn from some of the stalwarts of the industry, go work with people who were exceptionally smart, exceptionally talented. Certainly gave me a lot of insecurity every single day as to how good I was, but I also learned a lot from them. It raised my ambitions. It raised the bar in many of the things I did for me. It wanted me to get better every single day. So I'm very glad I made that choice. In many ways, that led to everything else I did after that. There were also a number of other choices I considered, including potentially pursuing a master's or studying further. But that was literally on the back of the dot-com bubble at that point in time. Things were a lot more harder than to actually sort of get scholarships and whatnot in foreign universities. So it was a little tricky times. So it made a lot of sense for me to go work, gather a bit of experience, test myself against the real world, and then make my choices after that.
Makes sense. So what I'm hearing you say, and this resonates pretty strongly, is that you had an awesome peer group as well as people that you could really learn a lot from, and in a particularly well-established, good brand name companies such as ITC. There was a lot of learnings there as well, and that makes a lot of sense. Cool. All right. So as a follow-up to that, Ram, how would you advise a student to go about this decision today? So between the options that students have today, working right after undergrad, like you did, doing a master's degree or an MBA or even a PhD and starting a business, is there a framework that you would suggest for making this decision today?
I think the easy answer is it depends, right? It depends on what your circumstances are, and I guess the most important factor is what excites you really. I don't believe that's how I made my choice, but I think the reality is a significant number of us will actually end up doing everything over the course of our careers. You will probably end up studying something more. It may be a master's, may not be a master's, but we might end up studying something. We might end up working for a large organization at some point in time in our careers. We might also end up starting our own firms at some point in time in our careers, right? So these are not necessarily mutually exclusive choices. And I know of people who actually do two things at the same time. They're studying and working, or studying and still have started a firm or so. So I think we live in a very different era now, where a lot of things are possible. And I guess the easy way to make this choice is literally a two-dimensional choice, right? Like, one, what excites you? What do you want to test yourself against? Do you want to test yourself against another university which offers higher education, and you want to measure yourself against what they offer you and how you fare? Or you want to test yourself against a larger organization, or you want to test yourself against the journey of being an entrepreneur, where obviously you're in a highly resource constrained environment and you got to figure out how things work. So really, like, what excites you? What do you want to test yourself against? And I think the second dimension is very practical. What are your circumstances at this point in time, right? It's not always easy for everyone to afford an expensive higher education. It's not always easy for someone to say, I'm going to take the more challenging, riskier path of entrepreneurship on day one, because maybe I don't feel confident enough to go try something like that on day one. And the challenge there always is, I can answer this question as to what you should not do, right? What you should not do is just have the herd mentality and follow what everyone else is doing. I guess a lot of us probably did that.
Yeah, me too.
We all must have done that at some point.
Right.
We all did it, I guess, when we graduated from our undergraduate programs, or even graduate programs later, masters, and so on and so forth. That's probably not the way to do it. Of course, the circumstances to some degree dictate what choices you make. But end of the day, your first job is very, very important. What do you do right after, whether it's an undergrad degree or a master's degree, is very important. Why? The chances are that's going to decide what you will end up doing 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. So just take a simple example. Someone starts in sales. The chances are they will be a really good salesperson 7-8 years down the line. If you start as a programmer, the chances are 6-7 years down the line, you'll be an awesome programmer.
Right.
If you start in management, the chances are 7-8 years down the line, you'll be a good manager, and that's what sets. Of course, you can always change careers, and those options exist, but there is a much higher probability that you will end up doing well in something you started, because that's where you put your focus and energy and effort. So that choice is very important. So therefore, instead of just following the herd and making the choice, I guess it's useful to step back and figure out what excites us and why I really want to do what I want to do. Even if it takes me a little bit longer to figure that out, I think it's okay to start with some place which really excites and excites a person, and you can sort of see yourself doing that over the next 5, 6, 7 years or so.
Makes sense. I love how the way you created the framework of what would you like to challenge yourself against versus what are your circumstances. I think that's a very good way of looking at it. And I also think that what you should not do is just as important as what you should do. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's it's probably the first time I'm hearing that on this podcast. Somebody saying what you should not think, how you should not think about doing this. That's great. Thanks, Ram. I have a sequence of questions, but because of what we just said right now, I'm going to jump ahead to a slightly different question, because it's sort of a good segue, right? What if what if the student thinks they like something right now, right? But then a few years down the line, after working in a particular area, you said how important the first job is, right? And they started on something, and a few years down the line, they realized, man, this is not as much fun as I thought it was initially. So maybe they started coding, and then 5 years down the line, they decided, no, I want to get into management, right? How would you go about, at that point, how should they go about deciding? Should they persevere and continue? Is it just a momentary blip? Or should I say, should I cut my losses, drop this, and pick something else up that is fun to do, right? What would you advise in that case?
It's a great question. And I don't even think it's really a what if question, right? It's going to happen to everyone. We all think we like something, we all do some things, and sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. And you always are looking for different experiences in life at some point in time, right? So I see there are potentially two guiding principles as to how you might want to make a decision around this, right? The first guiding principle is trying to understand the why. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you find something exciting? Well, let's say you've done something for 3, 4, 5 years and you don't find it exciting, interesting, not fun anymore, or you feel compelled to explore a change.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is driving it? Is it the nature of what you're doing? Is it the rewards associated with that? Is it that you're working for a great organization, but the people you're working with aren't necessarily giving you that good experience? Or you're seeing someone else doing exceptionally well in their careers and you want to find a way to emulate them.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a plethora of reasons as to why you might start reconsidering that choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to understand that why is very important, because I've often seen cases where people hit a sort of a brick wall. They don't like what they're doing anymore, and they just make a choice and move on.
Yep.
I would rather say go to your group of mentors. I mean, first thing is you have to cultivate a good group of mentors somehow,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
both within the organization and potentially outside.
Right.
Talk to them, try to understand the why, and the change you want to make, will that actually answer the why, right? Will it help address the why? If it does not, the chances are you're going to do it somewhere else or do something else somewhere and still find yourself in a frustrating position.
Right.
Oftentimes we don't spend enough time because we're making an emotional decision. We sort of had it enough, and then you want to make a choice, right? I think so that's one way to actually look at it. The second way to look at it is, if there is one thing that everyone in this world has that's like the common denominator, is time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have 24 hours in a day. That's it. No one knows how long we will live. You don't really want to put up with stuff you don't want to put up with.
Right.
Or keep doing something that's not exciting, or keep doing something that's, you're finding it hard to get out of the bed to go do something, or you just think there's something else better out there for you to go do. Right. So the question always is, how long do I persevere? I don't think the question is, should I persevere or not?
Right.
I think all of us, to some degree, are rational. We try to figure out the why. We try to figure out what other options exist. And many a times, do nothing may not be a bad choice. Because you're trading off, this is the story of, a known devil versus an unknown angel, right? You're trading risks in many ways by making a choice, trying to do something else, and then figuring out that's actually not working either. But there is also a broader point here, which is, we often treat our lives as a series of achievements. Our careers as a series of achievements, and somehow we are programmed that way, right? Like from the time you're young, you're constantly looking to achieve something, and once you've got one trophy, the next trophy, the next trophy, the next trophy. We condition in many ways the way. If you start seeing life as, or rather career as, a series of experiences rather than a series of achievements, then you almost can go, not go wrong, because whatever you do, there is something that you experience and something you learn, and never know when they'll be useful. So I know it's a slightly long answer to your question, but I think understanding the why, not necessarily putting too much time into something which is not working well for you, and treating your career as a series of experiences rather than a series of achievements, I think will help a person make the right choice, whatever that choice is for them.
Awesome. I think you brought some amazing points in there. I think even myself, I think perhaps spending an uncomfortable amount of time on the why is totally worth it, is one thing I think you're saying. And then at some point, time box it. If you realize that this is not going anywhere, cut your losses and move on. But spend the amount of time on the why first before you make the decision. And I think a great point about don't focus on the achievements, that is the success versus failures, but focus on the learnings and the experiences. Great points, Ram. Great points. Awesome. Let me go back to my regular sequence, which is, so while you were at university, did you do something further to improve your non-technical skills? What I mean by that is specifically your communication skills, your vocabulary, speaking, writing. How do you, meet with groups of people, presentation, and things like that?
Yeah. So look, I think like a lot of people, I was relatively good at academics as well. So doing well on the academic front was I wouldn't, it was not a big challenge. Of course, you had to put in the effort to get the right output. But that wasn't the big challenge for me. For me, the biggest challenge was, I came from a rural background, and that created a lot of challenges for me, not from an external point of view. It's just like inside my own head, right? So until I was 15, I was in a very, very small village on the outskirts of Madurai, which is a city or town, as you might want to call it, in southern India. No one in my family had ever been to a college before. I, of course, was given the opportunity to study in an English medium school where the medium of instruction was English, but no one in my family spoke English. No one around me spoke English. So even though I knew academically I was capable, and if I put in the effort, I will get the right output, which I did, I was very short on confidence, right? I constantly doubted if I was good enough. I constantly doubted if I belonged in the same league as other very talented, smart, intelligent, hardworking students that were there and this happened in both in my undergrad, and even after I had worked for 4 years and gone to the US for my master's, the same self-doubts lingered in my head almost all the time, right? But I think the way to deal with it is, at least what worked for me, was just start doing things. You overthink it, and the chances are you're going to actually reinforce that belief that you're not good enough. So there's tons of opportunities around you, right? Be it clubs or activities, sporting activities, leadership opportunities out there, cultural, literary, whatever excites you, just go sign up and try it, give it a go. It's a bit of rapid experimentation. If there are 100 things in front of you, go try 20 at least. Maybe 3 or 4 you will figure out you're good enough. Or you enjoy, right? It doesn't always have to be you're good enough.
Right.
So you enjoy that, you really like it. And many a times it's not just the activity itself, it's the people with whom you do that activity matters. Right? So you enjoy their company, you're learning, you're contributing. That eventually leads to improved confidence and improved, a lot of self-doubt start going away. You find certain things where you're actually contributing above and beyond just the academic side of things. So I would say, just go sign up. If I just now almost reflect 15, 20 years back to both my master's and undergrad, I was at least doing 10, 15 other things outside of academics on a regular basis. Was I good at all of it? I don't know, but I truly enjoyed it. It is a matter of time commitment. Right? So you need to find the time to do it.
Right.
It can be draining at times, but I think that's the only way to sort of put yourself out there, try as many things as you can, see what sticks, what you enjoy, and ultimately helps build, confidence and, capability over time.
Great. It sort of goes back to your earlier point about think of it as experiences as opposed to achievements, right? Try it and try as many as you can. And great points. I think you just
what do you have to lose? There is nothing to lose, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah.
It's probably the easiest environment for you to put yourself, out there and test things out. There's very little you actually have to lose, and it's just, again, a question of how much time you can find into it.
Correct. Makes sense. So on that thread, right? So you did a bunch of things. You like you said, you probably did 10 other things in addition to academics while you were at university. And these were all experiences that they taught you in many ways, right? Outside of just the academic part, right? How would you advise students to go about finding the specialization, the skills that are really valuable? So they're doing a bunch of things. Which one should they really try to get better at? Of course, there's a question of what they really enjoy doing. And like you said, the people that they do it with, right? They work with. But are there, if they had to sort of reduce the time commitment and sort of specialize in a few of those, how should you think about that?
Yeah, I guess one, something we don't realize when we are, let's say, 18 or 19 or 20 is, learning is going to be lifelong, right? We somehow sort of believe that, when we graduate, then you're already, learn it enough and we can go figure, do things. And learning doesn't stop. And, a growth mindset's incredibly important as we go along. And, as we pick up jobs, as we try different things start building our careers, we realize every single day we are learning new things and we are trying to get better every single day, right? So that's that I think carrying that mindset is probably the most crucial bit of how we want to deal with this. To specifically answer the question on what skills are valuable, how you find that, I'm going to give you a super mathematical answer to this. This concept of Venn diagrams, right? So we're all used to Venn diagrams,
right?
Whether we like it or not. It's a pretty complex Venn diagram.
Right.
At least 4 circles that need to intersect, let's say.
Right.
So, like you rightly said, one, what are you good at?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's very important because we are not all good at everything.
Mm-hmm.
We are good at certain things. And oftentimes, the second question is, what do you really enjoy? And people really enjoy stuff that they're good at.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's child's play to them. They probably have an unfair advantage doing it or whatnot. Right?
Exactly. Right. So they really enjoy it. So what are you good at? What do you really enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
And there are 2 other very important factors that nobody teaches you. And this is scarcity of that skill and the relevance of that skill in the current circumstances and in the immediate future.
Right.
Right. Because
will the world pay you for doing that, essentially?
Yeah, because that's exactly it, right? Because if you have a skill that almost everyone else has,
right,
it's not that valuable.
Right.
Right. And let's say you have a very unique skill that no one else has, but no one cares about that skill.
That's not
then
valuable.
Also it's pretty useless. I mean, you can't monetize it anyway. Right. So scarcity and relevance are very, very important. So for example, during the COVID times, if you knew how to create a vaccine, it would have been an exceptionally relevant and scarce skill, correct?
True.
But the challenge is most people didn't know how to do it, and the very few that knew how to do it, and I'm sure they can find a way to monetize that. So that's quite important. So there's obviously the softer side of what am I good at, what do I really enjoy, because that's important to me. But my ability to monetize it and make something out of it, get something out of it, highly depends on the scarcity of that skill and the relevance of that skill. So if you can find something that sort of ticks all the 4, then you are in the right place. You've got the answer to the question.
Makes sense. Cool. All right. This is a question that keeps coming up from a bunch of students that I talk to. So they say they hear it's a good idea to have 5-year plans or a multi-year plan, right? Either when you are perhaps when you are a recent graduate in the working industry, maybe even as a current student, right? But this is super hard to figure out for most people, especially early in their careers or even at university. What's your take on multi-year plans? Does it even make sense to come up with a 5-year plan? And if your answer is yes, how should we go about? Or the answer could be no also.
Personally, I'm a fan of planning. But would I advise everyone else to do it or others to do it? I'm not so sure. Right. And the reason for that is very simple. I mean, plan assumes certain level of granularity. Right. What you want to do and how you're actually going to do it, and what resources you require to do it. So it requires a certain level of deeper understanding and thinking of where you want to get to and how you're going to get it, right? Which is very hard because there are so many uncontrollables. So therefore, I would say maybe instead of a plan, a vision for yourself, I think is very good. At least knowing where you want to be, what excites you, where you want to be, I think is quite important. And then adaptability around that, the execution of the vision probably is very important, like more than the plan itself, because things change very quickly. I mean, who thought, the world will be the world we live in? I mean, 4 weeks ago, the world was a different place.
Yep.
I'm sure you know what I'm referring to.
Right.
If you're in Eastern Europe, your world was a very different place.
Correct.
4 weeks ago, right?
Yep.
2 years ago, the world was a very different place. No one ever thought we'll all be seeing a pandemic in our lifetime.
Everybody was working in an office.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to recognize things change and things will change and circumstances will change. Our goals will change. our thinking around how to get there will change. So I would rather say, have a vision, maybe, someone's, let's say, let's take someone like myself, 5 years ago, I was still in corporate, was still doing, strategy consulting type work for large corporates and organizations. But I always knew that, okay, in 5 years from now, maybe this is not what I'll be doing. And potentially I want to go create something. But I didn't know if it was going to be entrepreneurship, if it was going to be something in arts, go make a film. I don't know. But I wanted to create something, and I felt that would excite me. Right?
Yep.
But I didn't know like what specific sort of company I'll be building. Like I've never done anything in the world of, B2B software as a service earlier in my life. But I'm currently running a B2B SaaS startup. I mean, who would have predicted that 2 years ago or 3 years ago that I would be doing this? But having that vision, a little bit of direction of travel, I think helps. But the adaptability and the ability to recognize opportunities and the signposts that come along the way, and make quick decisions and act on that probably is more important and relevant skill or ability than really like getting more granular planning and try to stick to that path. Again, there is no right or wrong answer to this, I guess. But have I made my next 5-year plan? Absolutely not. Am I improving myself every single day to be a lot more adaptable and figure out how I can deal with what's being thrown at me or what I'm encountering? Definitely I'm doing it.
Absolutely. I think that you're right that there are no right or wrong answers, but I definitely think that your answer is very insightful. It tells you how you went about doing it, and I think there's a lot to learn there, right? I love the idea of having a vision, but being flexible enough to sort of change the paths you take to get to that vision, and understanding what are the milestones that you need to be looking at to make sure that you are continuing to directionally go in the direction of your vision as opposed to getting sidetracked somewhere.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Are there specific courses from your, undergrad chemical engineering degree or your MBA coursework that you really find useful in your work every day? And if I were to put that another way, if you were to advise students in university or early in their careers, these are, a set of skills or courses or something that you really, just about everybody should be reasonably good at, what would they be?
Yeah. Here's the truth. The truth is intelligence is overrated. Academic, how should you put it? How great you are at academics is overrated. It's very hard for me to answer the question that any course from my chemical engineering days 20 years ago, was it really helpful? Honestly, no, because I never did chemical engineering work after I graduated. I went straight into management on day one. But I'll tell you what did help me was the environment I was in, and NIT Trichy was very competitive. It allowed me to test myself with and against some of the brightest minds out there. And certainly that helped me raise my own standards and, kindle that competitive fire in me to say, okay, I'm going to try hard. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be the best I can be. So that was very, very important. So it was not very, very academic in nature, but without a doubt, the competitive spirit and what it did to me was very important, right? But I did absolutely love the MBA program I did later, 4 or 5 years down the line in the US. It was a great university, but most importantly, we had some amazing, educators in that institution who shared their expertise and their knowledge, genuinely shared a lot of that with us. The one particular subject or class I really enjoyed was it was called advocacy by a professor called John Daly. Again, is an expert and an authority in that space. Advocacy was all about how you generate buy-in for your ideas, how you get buy-in for your ideas, how do you work within an organization to get things done. Be it a small or a large organization, how do you recognize situations? What techniques, tools you can use to actually progress, your ideas or whatever needs to get done. How do you get that done, right? It is probably the most important skill as you grow in your career, but is not taught when you're younger, right? So there's incredible emphasis on technical education. But even if you're a phenomenal engineer, you came up with the greatest idea on the planet, you're building a new brain, you still need to convince a bunch of people that it is worth doing it.
Yep.
I know you work for the Moonshot Factory at Google, and I'm sure you guys come up with a lot of cool ideas, but it is a large organization, and try to get buy-in, rally people around, galvanize people around the idea, find the funding, find the opportunities to take it to market. All of those things matter, right? So I absolutely love that. And John Daly has a book on the same topic called advocacy. So if anyone's very interested in what I'm talking about, you can actually read it. But it's that's something I carry every single day. It comes very handy for me.
Cool. I agree with you 200% in terms of this being a very critical life skill in terms of convincing others, influencing others with authority, and I think you're absolutely right. I love how you brought up that course. I think that's pretty awesome. What were your thoughts about money while you were in university and even early in your career, right? And did you, to the extent you would like to share, how did you go about? Did you save your money? Did you invest your earnings early in your career, or even while you were at university?
Well, my only thought was I had no money at the time.
That was the case for most of us, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. There was none of it, and I think it's look. I mean, creating wealth for yourself is a very important aspect of anyone's career. Right? I think it's easy to sit and say you don't need money, but you do need to. How much you want is entirely a personal choice. What you're going for is entirely a personal choice. But wealth creation is important. Now, in the early stages of your career, is wealth creation very important? Saving, investing, is that very important? I'm not so sure. I don't think so. I mean, I didn't have a lot, so I didn't have to really contemplate these sort of choices. But I think investing in yourself at that stage is very important.
Yep.
Right. Whether it is through another education degree, or whether it's through traveling the world and seeing the world, travel is like the perfect antidote to ignorance.
Yep.
If you want to invest in yourself doing that, it's a great thing to do. Whatever helps you to sort of invest in yourself, right? That's probably more important. I had a manager, I shouldn't say manager, he was CEO of a business unit that I worked for. He was my boss. He was very young, and I worked for him for a number of years in the past. And he told me that don't prioritize how much you make in the early stages of your career, because his view was he never did, but he still became a CEO at 31, right? And his view was, you focus on the things that matter. What are the sort of things that matter from a career point of view? You go work for an organization that is growing. You go work for a team or a boss that's actually growing. You go work for a team where you are valued and you're respected and you're given exciting opportunities. Those sorts of things actually help you get to a position of influence much faster, right? And when you get to that sort of position of influence, naturally you make a lot more money than you would have made 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Right.
So the choice therefore is, do I focus on how much I make in the short term, or do I focus on the experiences and focus on investing in myself and getting better with the view of getting to those positions of influence as soon as I can, and then therefore find a faster way of wealth creation.
Right.
That is the choice.
Makes sense. The side effect of that second step is the nice side effect of that is wealth creation takes care of itself a little bit easier that way.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. And that's that, because I think it's very hard to focus on money when you're 21, 22. I think that's certainly not. I'm sure a lot of people advise that's not where you would want to focus at the time. If you're gifted, you have this phenomenal idea, which is like the next Mark Zuckerberg type idea you got. Okay, that's a different story, right? I mean, then you're focused on wealth creation right away. But I think a lot of people, want to get better, invest in themselves, find the right opportunity that works for them, whether it is working somewhere else or your own startup or whatever that is, and put yourselves in the position of influence as soon as you can. And like you said, that takes care of the wealth creation itself.
Yeah. So Ram, you're a startup founder right now, at least for the last 1 year plus, right? And even before that, you've been in very high profile, intense, high performing environments, right? How do you balance I'm sure this is not easy. You have to spend a lot of time at work, right? How do you balance that with ensuring your own personal health, especially in this era of COVID where we are working from home, right? Are there some personal productivity hacks or tips that work well for you that you can share?
I'm not sure if I'm the best person to provide advice and guidance on how to be very healthy, but I guess it varies from one person to the other. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other, but I'll tell you what worked in my case. Right, number one, buy a dog, because that makes sure you're walking at least 3 times a day with your dog. So there goes 90 minutes of walking every day. That gives you time to decompress from everything else you're doing, and also takes care of at least you get enough steps for a day if you want to do it, and maybe a little bit of time playing with the dog as well later. So that gives you a bit of get out of your seats and decompress a bit. I think cooking is a great way of taking care of 2 things, right? It's an outlet for your creativity. And you take your mind off everything else for that period of time, because you can't half-heartedly focus on cooking. You have to be fully focused. Otherwise you're going to eat bad food.
Right.
Cooking also, make sure you're not ordering 5 takeaways a week.
You're more likely to eat healthy, right?
Exactly. You're more likely to eat healthy. So I think these are very simple things that I think, or the other thing I've seen a lot of people do is just pick up a fun activity that you like, right? In my household, table tennis is a big thing, or ping pong, as they call it, is a big thing. Everyone's interested in playing. So in our garage, we put a ping pong table and we play 30 minutes a day, or 30 minutes every 2 or 3 days. So I don't think you need anything big. It's just small things like that. I'm sure can help, keep your mind off just work, because you're quite right. It's very hard to switch off from work and it's just nonstop all the time. Finding those small outlets, I think, help me cope, but I'm sure everyone else has their own way of how they cope.
Right. And I think on the question of ping pong, it probably helps that you have like a championship ping pong player at home as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I'm also the punching bag in many ways, because I get beaten all the time. I also make sure my ego always stays well below a level, because I have an opportunity to lose all the time then. Anyways, it's great fun doing it. And you just got to find ways that work for you, whatever works for you.
Great. Makes sense. All right. Finally, let's have some fun with a few rapid fire questions. These are, just try to spend no more than, 10 seconds on each of these, right? In terms of an answer. Can you name a book or a TV show that completely changed or significantly changed the way you think?
A number of them, but, big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. So Outliers, many other books of Malcolm Gladwell, I think very, very insightful. The Servant by James Hunter is a great book about leadership, which I loved. No Excuses by Kyle Maynard, again, a great book. So there are a lot of books like that. I'm a little bit of a fan of self-improvement type books, which everyone in my household hates, but except me. But I think Malcolm Gladwell is a great place to start if you're looking for something different, something that should challenge your thinking, how you traditionally perceive certain things. One of the recent reads was the book written by Michael Holding, Why We Kneel and Why We Rise. It's a fantastic book. Again, you talk about racial inequality and that again challenges a lot of perspectives that people hold. So there are some examples. So anyway, 20 seconds answer to you.
Great. These are great examples. I have to confess that I've not read all of them, but definitely some things for me to go back and check on as well. Thanks for sharing that. What was your best career move and your biggest career mistake?
I think best career move was making the choice to go pursue my master's in the US. Because that helped me go see the world, and that changed the way I looked at the world. And it helped me create opportunities for myself in many ways. If I hadn't done that, I don't know what I would be doing, what I'd be at this point in time. But definitely sort of breaking the status quo and taking huge amounts of loan, borrow a lot of money, and go do that was certainly worth it. Worst career move was to turn down an incredible opportunity at a startup 10 years ago, which now I won't name it, but it's one of the exceptionally well-performing companies. I don't want to use the word unicorn, but they are much more than a unicorn now. But I turned an opportunity for a very critical leadership role in that organization 10 years ago. But again, you can't connect the dots forwards.
Yep.
You just have to deal with the decision at that point in time.
Nice. I think as far as your best career move in terms of going to do your MBA in the US, I think that's around the time I first met you, and I have to say that I think you aced it. If I remember correctly, you were top of your class at MBA, right? At B school.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the best thing or not, but I was told that if you performed really, really well, they'll waive your second year tuition fee off. So there was no other choice. You just had to do it so that you don't have to take further loans and whatnot.
Student loans and whatnot.
It worked out. Yeah, it worked out well, I must say.
Great incentive. In your case, it was a fantastic incentive. Awesome. And finally, if you could tell your 20-year-old self just one sentence, what would you say?
Be confident, be fearless, and don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough.
Awesome, Ram. Ram, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sridhar, thanks so much for having me. It was a very, very, very delightful conversation. Also great to speak to you after a very long time.
Thanks.
Thank you.